The Roman Empire, one of history's greatest, but like any empire, they had their years of stability, whatever this was, and those years of full-blown chaos, or in this case, the year of the four emperors. But who were they, and what happened that year? The year of the four emperors began in the year 68 AD, with the suicide of Emperor Nero, marking the end to his comically strange reign. And following his death, the Senate needed to make the hard decision of who would take the throne. Ultimately, they decided on Galba, or the first of the four emperors. Galba came from a wealthy family, and despite having no blood relation to the previous emperors, was well respected, and held positions of power from consul to governor, ruling over the provinces of Africa and Hispania, and upon hearing of Nero's death, Galba saw this as his chance to secure the throne. So he began his journey from Hispania, modern-day Spain, towards Rome, and alongside him, the governor of Lusitania, Otho. Upon arrival, Galba was able to gain the support of the Praetorian Guard, whose support he gained by promising them a large amount of money. Go figure. However, this move was not without avail, as soon after, Galba would be named Caesar, which was great. Rome now had a new emperor, so all should be solved, right? Nope. One key detail that I forgot to touch on was what he did on his way to Rome. When he left Hispania, Galba and his legionaries plundered any communities that did not support him, which, quite understandably, frustrated several provinces. Oh, and that money that he promised the Praetorian Guards, yeah, he didn't pay them either. Which is really when his reign started to decline. Alongside these less than sensible choices, he was also advised and listened to recommendations from corrupt men, which resulted in Galba disbanding Germanic legions and seizing the properties of Roman citizens. And alongside these less than optimistic political moves, Galba chose to name Licinianus, the Roman nobleman, as his heir, rather than Otho, the man who marched to Rome alongside him. What this resulted in was the 4th and 22nd Germanic legions rebelling, followed days later by other legions, and by the 15th of January, not even 8 months into his reign, he would have conspirators from his own Hispanic legions, the Praetorian Guards he didn't pay, Illyria, and Britannica legions. Oh, and of course, from Otho too. However, Otho, noticing the brewing unrest, decided to use it to his advantage, with Otho bribing the Praetorian Guard to help him overthrow Galba. Oh, but he actually paid them. What this resulted in was the Praetorians setting up a plot, and in an effort to rule out Galba, they stated that they had killed Otho, which he complained about, ironically, and then proceeded to kill him, marking the end of Galba's very brief reign, and likewise the beginning of Otho's. However, almost immediately after taking the title of emperor, Otho faced the reality that was set in place by his predecessor, facing the reality of just how upset the Germanic legions really were. Vitellius, commander of the Germanic legions of the Lower Rhine, had already begun his march to Rome. However, in a rather surprising move, the newly named emperor actually prepared for war, and sent his fleet to confront the opposition, which led to several battles, with the largest being the Battle of Bedriacum. However, in what seems to be typical fashion, Otho ignored the recommendations of seasoned officers to hold his advance before the rest of his legions arrived, and believe it or not, Otho sending his forces forward didn't work out too well. Upon their initial advance, Otho's forces would unexpectedly encounter the entirety of Vitellian's forces, which resulted in resistance but eventually a chaotic retreat from the forces of Otho. The following day, Vitellian's troops would march to Otho's camp, but surprisingly were met with a non-violent acceptance from Otho's disheartened soldiers. The battle claimed a total of around 40,000 soldiers. Following this, despite still harboring a very formidable force with high spirits, Otho believed that he needed to be accountable for the failure of his premature advance. The emperor then proceeded to give this speech, quote, "It is far more just to perish one man for all than many for one." And later in the night, on April 16th, he stabbed himself in the camp, marking the end of his 87-day reign. Otho made this decision wanting to avoid civil war and unrest within the empire. Following Otho's death, Vitellius took this as his chance to finally secure the throne, which is exactly what he did, and shortly after marching to Rome, he would be named Caesar by the Senate. However, upon his enthronement, he made the very smart decision of throwing tons of gladiatorial games to reward his legionaries, which put even further burden on the already hurting treasury, which, understandably, angered many citizens. Oh, and alongside this, he killed his mother to fulfill a prophecy that would ensure him a long reign. Oh, and he banned all astronomers in October, which they ignored because space is cool, but also resulted in many of them being killed. Additionally, Vitellius was also noted for his ridiculous feasts, believe it or not. However, shortly after Vitellius became emperor, he would face his first military challenges, with several eastern provinces proclaiming Vespasian, a military leader and governor, as their emperor. Ultimately, the forces would meet once again at Bedriacum for war once more, and after a failed attempt by Vitellius to garner support from the Gauls, Vespasian's troops came out victorious. Vitellius, after realizing the position he was in, prepared to abdicate the title of Caesar. And having already agreed on terms, he went to give up the insignia of emperor at the Temple of Concord. However, upon his arrival, the Praetorian Guards denied him in doing so and forced him to retain the throne. Furthermore, upon Vespasian's arrival in Rome, supporters of Vitellius displayed fierce resistance and bloody fighting that filled the streets of Rome, ultimately resulting in the death of around 50,000 people. However, despite the resistance, in due time the citizens would be subdued and Vitellius would be forced out of hiding, and alongside him his guards would make a last stand, and a short time later Vitellius would be executed at the Gemonian stairs. Only a day after his death, on December 21st, 69 AD, Vespasian would be named emperor, becoming the last of the 4 emperors. Vespasian would go on to rule a lengthy 10 years, with a reign that consisted of many reforms as well. His predecessors weren't exactly great. These reforms took the forms of tax laws, such as the urine tax. Vespasian also led the first conquest to Egypt since the time of Augustus, where he was seen as a pharaoh, so I guess that's something. And like some of the past emperors, civil unrest and civil wars were still rampant throughout the empire. However, his son Titus and son-in-law Cerealis managed to subdue most of it. Furthermore, Vespasian conducted massive reforms within the military and government, replacing past and current enemies with allies, which was a very strategic move considering he was the 4th emperor in 1 year. Additionally, noticing that he still did not have the full public support that he wanted, he launched vast propaganda campaigns, from things such as buildings bearing his names to historical press censorship, including the teachings of some philosophers. And well, that's kind of it. Of course, he had many conspirators against him, but none that would find themselves successful. Vespasian ended his reign when he fell ill, eventually dying in Rome on the 23rd of June in 79 AD. And there you go. Now you know, more or less, the history of the year with the 4 emperors. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing for future content. If you have any further comments or would like to add any details that I may have skipped over, make sure to comment them. Thanks.